Morning, Abraham. Thank you very much for all the wisdom I've gotten for you, which has been very helpful. And yet there are several questions remaining. Some of them pertain to what you were talking a moment ago, relative to the guidance system. What I've heard you say is that what's relevant is where you are relative to where you want to be. But there are cases where, at least I've found, that it's not always easy to know where you are. And specifically, I'm thinking of something that's called free-floating anxiety, where you feel uneasy, but you have no idea what the thought is that triggered that unease. And I was wondering how you can use a process along the lines you have described to feel better when you don't know what caused the anxiety in the first place.
Well, when you say, I acknowledge that I have guidance within me and that my emotions are giving me feedback. Mm-hmm. And then you say, but I have no idea what the feedback is. And you keep beating the drum of it. I don't know what this is. I don't know what this is. I don't know what this is. You're not going to figure out what it is. But when you say, I want to know what this feeling is about. I want to match up through association what this feeling is about. Before you know it, you're going to be in the middle of that feeling, and you're going to be having some conversation about something, and you're going to say, that's what it is about. However, you don't have to know specifically what it is about. You just have to feel it and try to talk yourself out of it. Now, that's what we're talking about here today when we're talking about moving up the emotional scale. We're talking about trying to find a thought that gives you the feeling of relief. So you've asked the perfect question for us to begin with here today. And the perfect answer to the perfect question is the relief factor, the feeling of relief, is your indication that you've left some resistance behind. So does it make sense to you that you don't really need to know the specifics of what the resistance was about, that it's helpful to know that you just left it behind? So let's say that you're watching television and that you heard Charlie Rose interviewing someone who says that Korea has nuclear weapons and that they intend to test them, and that they're not going to give these nuclear weapons up easily because they want to be one of the big boys playing at the table, and they don't want to be the next Saddam. They want to have some leverage again. And so you're listening to this and you're feeling uneasiness wash over you. Now, pretty easy to understand that that would give you a feeling of uneasiness because, first of all, you have no real power there. You're not making the decisions. You can't get the people who are making the decisions to listen to you. These people are all playing in some other game that has little to do with what all of you seem to want in terms of the democratic votes or not so democratic votes that are happening around the world. And so you feel powerless. You're hearing something that feels a threat to you, to your children, to your grandchildren, and to their children, and we think that's grounds for a little uneasiness, you see. So now you're sitting there with that uneasiness and you say, I can't do anything about that. Now, that's what most people would say. Most people would say, I have no power over this, which just exacerbates the uneasiness, maybe even takes uneasiness into downright vulnerability, into downright worry, into downright fear, you see. And so we don't think that any of you are incapable of, with rather easy effort, figuring out that this thought feels a little uneasy. Now, here's the thing that we really want you to hear, because it seems obvious from what we've said and from what you know that you don't have any real power to change any of that, but you do have the power to change the way you feel about it. And so you try to talk yourself into a better feeling place. So you say things like, well, they're probably going to explode a bomb, and then we'll explode a bomb, and then they'll explode a bomb, and then we'll all be dead. Well, that's moving the wrong way on the emotional scale. You feel your uneasiness increasing, and so then you say, wait a minute, North Korea started this process in 1950. This has been a very long process that they have been involved in. And they are wise people. They care about life. They're not likely to all of a sudden, they're wanting it as leverage. That might make you feel a little better. You might say the Soviet Union had bombs ready to launch, and still does, that held us in a place of deterrence for all of those years. And no bombs were exploded because everyone was too smart for that, and we actually lived, while we talked about things and stirred each other up, we actually lived in relative peace with these superpowers having this leverage. Maybe it isn't such a bad thing, and why shouldn't everybody be able to defend themselves if they want to? We're not saying that these are the right things to say. We're saying that what you're wanting to do is fish around until you find the right thing for you that makes you feel better. Because while there is this action journey moving along here, there is an emotional journey moving concurrently with it. And in most cases, you can't control the action journey. You can't make your government or other governments do something different than what they've decided to do, not right now, this red hot minute. But you can do something about your emotional response to it, you see. And so we want you to begin by no longer saying, I have emotions that I can't trace back. You could say, I have emotions that I haven't yet traced back. But every emotion that you have, you can associate with something. Esther and Jerry do a tremendous amount of driving. Esther does most of the driving, actually. And often, what she's thinking about while she's driving, as she'll have a wonderful feeling, she'll try to identify what the root association to it was. And then often, even if she can't find the root association with what is feeling so good, she will reach out to things that match it, and she will just parlay that good feeling into a better and better feeling. That's what we call the rampage of appreciation. Sometimes a feeling of uneasiness will wash over her, and she will say, now what is that about? And for Esther, when something unpleasant washes through her, she wants to know what the starting point is. But if she can't figure it out, she forgets the starting point and just moves as quickly as she can into something that feels better. You can do this, and you can do it every time. And diligence about it is really a worthy intention, because the way you feel is a true indication of your vibrational offering. And your vibrational offering is your point of attraction. And so this is cleaning up your vibration. This is balancing your energy. The thing that we think you'll hear here today that is going to set you at ease right away and make all of this easier for you is when you hear us say and understand it, and we can feel you coming to this, that balancing energy just means balancing the energy points in you. It doesn't mean aligning with North Korea or aligning with your own government or aligning with these people or these people or this people. It just means finding the balance between what you want and what your thoughts are relative to what you want. And what you will discover is, as you come into alignment on point after point, before you know, there are only about 5 major points that most of you need to come into alignment with, and there are about 1 million reasons that you are thinking about those 5 major points. So that feeling of uneasiness that you have might be about this and this and this and this and this, but at the heart of all of those things is a central theme that's running. In other words, you might be fussing about this and this and this and this and this, but at the root of it might be a feeling that you're not as powerful as you'd like to be, or that you don't have as much control of your own life experience as you'd like to have, you see. And so as you let one excuse or one subject at a time be your work ground where you work into a better feeling place, before you know it, you've cleaned that vibration up. And then 1 million thoughts that you had access to before, you don't have access because you took a half a day one day and just deliberately made yourself find better feeling points about the subject. You can do it on every single subject. We want so much to convince you that you are the creator of your own reality, and it is really worth figuring out what that feeling is. So never again sit before anyone and say, I've got emotions that I don't understand. Instead say, I've got emotions that are worth figuring out. I'm going to figure out what this uneasiness is about. And in the moment that you make the statement, I'm going to figure out what it is, uneasy things will show themselves to you. And you'll say, oh yeah, it's that, and 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 that. Mm-hmm. And then say, now how can I feel better about that? And how can I feel better about that? And how can I feel better about that? A woman with very powerful pain said to us one day, Abraham, how can I think about a healthy body when the body I've got hurts so much? I've got arthritis in my hips and I'm in pain. We said, well, that's what is right now, isn't it? We said, that's not going to change today or tomorrow or any time really soon. You've got arthritis in your hips. That's what is. That's your action journey right now. Just like we would say to someone, you've got no money in your bank account. or you're working someplace you don't want to work, or you're living with someone that's not pleasant to live with. In other words, there could be anything that's happening that is your action journey. But right alongside of that is how I feel about it. So we said to this woman with arthritis in her hips, you've got arthritis in your hips, that is, but the difference between having arthritis in your hips and being fearful about it, or having arthritis in your hips and being hopeful about it, is the difference between whether the arthritis will get worse or better. And that's what most people don't understand. They think what is has so many teeth in it that it has so much more power. And what is doesn't mean diddly squat. What is only what you've come to. It's only the platform from which you will launch your next thoughts, you see. And so if you will understand that anything that is remaining, anything that is continuing to be what is only continuing to be what is because you're continuing to give your attention to it. We really want to say this in a way that you can hear it, that when you look at what is, you perpetuate what is. So if you've got uneasiness, that means you're perpetuating something that you don't want. And the uneasiness is pointing right at what it is. So when you catch yourself in the moment of the uneasiness and you make the association, and you sometimes can and sometimes will be able to and sometimes won't be able to, you make the association with it and then you talk yourself into a better feeling place, you never go back to the place that you were before. And so, do you know that you could take 1 point of uneasiness, talk it up the scale a little bit, beat the drum of that new place long enough that you stabilize there, and many other points of uneasiness would now have been left behind. They're out of your vibrational range. It is so worth spending the time, you say. Good.
Thank you. Got another one on the guidance system, actually, and that is, I've had the impression that Abraham is saying the past is really irrelevant. It's only where you are now, again, relative to where you want to be. And yet, many therapists, including one I'm thinking of, a psychiatrist called Brian Weiss, has actually used hypnotherapy not only to deal with childhood issues, but even past life issues that seem to really help the people he works with.
Well, the reason that is true, and we don't disagree with that. We disagree with the premise that you have to go into the past. There really, from where you are, if you're looking toward where you want to go, you will go there. And looking back usually only slows the process down. But sometimes, if a person has for a long time been in a place they don't want to be, and someone can tap into the past and say to them, the reason that you've been here for so long is because this happened. Sometimes that gives them reason to let go. Sometimes that sort of therapy. Now, think about this emotional scale. So there's depression and fear, pretty much the same vibration. And then there's guilt, not too far different from that. And then there's blame. Which feels better, blame or guilt?
Blame.
So sometimes by going into the past and activating something that a person doesn't even consciously remember, and pointing out to them that this guilt that they've been carrying around for all that time really could be blame because somebody else did something to them, they take a little move up the emotional scale. We just think it's the long, hard way to go about it. Jerry and Esther, as they program in the destination that they want to go to, Magellan does not say, but where were you yesterday? Magellan does not say, I'm not going to give it to you. You asked yesterday and you didn't do what I suggested, I'm not going to give it to you. So really, we very much want to make the point that you are where you are, but everyone can't hear what we're saying here. In other words, there are a lot of people who, even after they've been listening to recordings of ours for a while, will sit in the chair and we will try to get them to talk about where they want to go, and they just insist on talking about where they are or where they have been. And the reason is because that dialogue is more comfortable because they've practiced it longer. And so those words just roll off their tongue. Very often somebody could go on for the whole seminar if we would allow it on the things that have been going wrong in their life. But when we say, but what do you want? They're sort of tongue-tied because they haven't practiced those words. And so there are a lot of therapists. And when we work with people individually, as we are with you here, sometimes we understand the value in sort of discovering where they are and sometimes going into the past is about discovering where their vibration is. Because, you know, most people who are vibrating as they are today vibrated there yesterday too. And most people who vibrated there yesterday vibrated there the day before. And in other words, most people, because they're not deliberately moving up the scale, are offering a vibration Esther remembers her mother who had her first heart attack when Esther was 14 years old. And Esther does not see very much change in her mother's vibration in all of these years. In other words, she sort of had that experience, responded to that experience, continues to offer the vibration of that experience, and attracts to that vibration through all of these years.